We are joined by Martin Newton. He is the athletic director at Samford and the vice chair of the men's basketball committee. And are you ticking down the clock to Selection Sunday, Martin?
It's getting close, man. I tell you, the excitement's in the air, right? We had the reveal show, the top 16 reveal show on Saturday, and that was a lot of fun. Got to be in studio and watch Keith Gill and the CBS folks put that together. And yeah, man, it's right around the corner. It's exciting times. And then, you turn around and start playing games on Saturday afternoon and Sunday that were just tremendous basketball games. So yeah, I'm fired up.
So let's start with that. We had two great non-conference games in Washington, D.C. on Saturday between, I don't know, four of the five, six, eight, 10 best teams in the country. Is that what's coming? Is the future going to be more games like that?
I don't know. I thought it was really smart on both Michigan and Duke. John Shire talked about wanting to play, trying to get another quad one opportunities outside of the ACC. And I thought it was really smart because it really, that atmosphere, although I wasn't there, I was able to watch it in the airport in New York. I got a delayed flight, but I was able to watch it. And that atmosphere on a neutral court was very similar to what a tournament atmosphere would be. So I think it was very smart. I think it's challenging. It's difficult to try to figure that out within your conference schedule because especially at the P4 level where they've got 16, 18 teams in a league. But I thought it was smart, and I think it'll benefit both teams, not just Duke, but I think it'll benefit both teams down the stretch.
I mean, if you go back a decade or maybe more, we had that bracket buster concept. How helpful is it, whether it be for the big boys or the mid majors, to play games like this woven into the league schedule?
Yeah, again, I think it depends on your league. I think it depends on what you need within your league. I would tell you from a mid-major standpoint, I think it's really important because it gives us opportunities to play maybe some quad two type games that we normally couldn't get. So again, I think it's a great concept. Look, anything that promotes the game of basketball, college basketball, is good in my eyes.
So, in that top 16 seeding that you guys did, and we understand the games have been played since then, and that will change things. But at the moment in time in which you did that Friday and then it was revealed on Saturday, what were the biggest discussion points? Where did people not agree?
We had a lot of discussion points, not just on the top 16, but as we went through and kind of scrubbed the entire bracket. But I think the biggest was on that one line. You had going into Wednesday night, we had Connecticut on the one line. They were the last number one seed. Coming back in on Thursday and scrubbing, Connecticut obviously lost a home game to Creighton. At the time, it was a quad three loss. It ended up being a quad two loss, but they lost that game. So as we scrubbed, Houston, Iowa State, and Connecticut, the committee decided to put Iowa State on that last four line. Houston dropped, Connecticut dropped to the number one four seed, and then Houston, obviously, that head to head with Iowa State where they lost to Iowa State. We just felt like Connecticut had some more quality wins than Houston did at that time. And so that's why they ended up moving to that top number four, and Iowa State moved to moved to the top number two line, and Iowa State moved to the top number one. And then, as you said, you turn around and play game Saturday, and then Iowa State goes to BYU and gets beat. So, and then Houston loses to Arizona at home. So it's just look, we got over 700 plus games to play for the remainder of the season. There's still going to be a lot of craziness that's going to that's why they call it March Madness, right?
Is when a game played meaningful, as in you saw a result on Wednesday and then you changed the seating for Saturday? Does that loss to Creighton have the same impact 2, 3 weeks from now than it did a few days ago?
Now, our focus is to look at the whole body of work. The season starts in November. We're going to look at the whole body of work. We're not going to just take one game and penalize a team for or reward a team for a win or a loss. The difference was that was a quad two loss for Connecticut. And if you looked at Iowa State, they had no quad two losses. All of their losses were in quad one. They had two losses in quad one at the time, TCU, and I believe I'm trying to remember the other one off the top of my head, but but we looked at the entire body of work. The resume metrics favored Iowa State as well. So again, no one game, no one loss, no one win elevates a team or lowers a team at that time.
You guys have Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. They lost one of the best players in the country for the season. How does that impact their seeding?
The Texas Tech, again, when we go into Wednesday night in that process, Texas Tech was sitting on the 3 line. They were the last number 3 seed. And so again, we get the news of the injury, and then we've got the severity of the news of the injury on Thursday that he was going to be out of the season. So at that time, we didn't, it's hard to project what's going to happen to Texas Tech, right? Uh, what we know is what we've got in this capsule of time, that they are deserving of a number 3 seed. So we did drop them a seed line. They went from the 3 line to the 4 line. And now we'll have a body of work that we can look at over the rest of the regular season and then in the conference tournament, so that as we start this process during the March selection, we'll have an idea of what their full body of work means, not just that capsule time. I use Gonzaga as an example for, they were out Braden Huff. But we could judge them. They played 10 games without him, so we kind of had a judgment of what they looked like. They were 9-1 without him. So we don't have that yet with JT Toppin. Now, Texas Tech, got to give them a lot of credit, man. They turned around the next night, had a big win against Kansas State. And so, again, we'll see how this thing plays out with them and how they play without them. The one thing with Texas Tech that the committee did recognize is this is not a very deep team. They do not play, they don't count on their bench. So when you take out an All-American, arguably one of the best players, if not the best player in college basketball this year, you take him out of your alignment and you don't have a deep bench, there's just a lot of unknowns right now with them.
So, do the final few weeks of the regular season mean more for them than other teams because you're trying to gauge how good they are without Toppin?
Yeah, exactly. I think they've got to, we're going to have some data because again, what we have to do is we have to judge those teams based on the current roster that they have. And regardless of suspensions, regardless of injuries, those type things. So for them to be able to perform well without him will show a lot of what kind of tournament team they are.
When you get to the room in the days leading up to Selection Sunday, are you trying, and I'm talking about for the at-large schools, are you trying to find the teams with the best resumes or the teams that are the best teams in that moment in time?
Say that one more time. I want to make sure I understand your question.
Are you trying to select the teams with the best resume
Yeah.
or the team that you think is the best at that period of time before we begin the tournament?
Yeah, well, our job is to pick the 37 best at-large teams, not the most deserving, but the best at-large teams. We've got a lot of tools in our tool belt, whether it's the net, whether it's the predictive measurements or the resume measurements. Resume measurements are very important for getting in the tournament. Obviously, that's your body of work. That's what you've done over the course of the season. The predictive measurements really help us as we look into the seeding process. But the wins above bubble is a tool that we use a lot this year. It's taken a lot more into account because we can really compare the schedules of, say, a mid-major team that hasn't had the opportunity maybe for as many quad one, quad two opportunities, how they would fare against an average bubble team. So again, we're looking at the whole body of work. We're looking at the entire season, not just it used to be you'd look at the last 10 games if a team was hot. That's not the case anymore. It's a full body of work.
So we've talked before about the eye test, and you've always said that that's very, very important. But we now have even more metrics, even more analytics. Is that any different now, or is it still the eye test is important, so too are the numbers? Or is there any change in weighting what is most important?
No, I think that it's a combination. I think you cannot rely just on the eye test watching teams, because again, then the metrics wouldn't matter. But you can't just rely on the metrics as well. So I think it's a combination of watching a lot of games, really having an opinion of how you feel a team is as one of the 37 best teams, and then weighing that with some of the metrics as well. Every committee member has different ways they view things, correct? That's why there's 12 of us in the room, and that's why we vote. And that's why we have a lot of discussion. And it's sometimes the discussion is pretty simple discussion. You make your case, somebody else makes their case. Other times it can get a little heated where you're having actual conversations that there's disagreement, but then we vote. And at the end of the day, it's 12 committee members voting to put a team in or to seed them.
When you look at a one bid league and you're looking at their representative, do you talk about the league at all, or is it strictly what the individual team has done?
So we have a conference monitoring program. So each committee member has about 6 teams that they're either the primary or the secondary conference monitor. And in those conference monitoring reports, we'll have about 3 of those reports a year, and then we'll get, as we're in the room, a question may come up about, hey, who had the SoCon? Tell me about what the SoCon said in their conference monitoring report. How did they have their teams ranked? And so the committee member will represent what the league had, and the committee member will also give his or her opinion on how they feel those teams are ranked. And so I think it's real that monitoring process, I think, Dave, is really important as you get in here because those conference monitors need to be the experts on those leagues. Now, the rest of the committee needs to have a knowledge of those leagues. In other words, you have to watch other teams. You've got to be able to watch teams outside of the six conferences that you monitor. But that's a really important part of this process.
So when you look at the SoCon, ETSU won the regular season championship on Saturday, and their non-conference had some highs and it had some lows. But in the league, they've clinched with 2 games still to play. Do they get credit for sort of dominating the first whatever 8 or 10 weeks of the conference season?
No, again, and I keep going back to this, but again, it's their full body work, right? It's what they've done over the course of the season. ETSU is a very good basketball team, but there's so much parity in this league. When you look at this league now, look, I'm not our conference monitor. I can't monitor my own conference, right? But listening to the conference monitoring report by the committee members, that's one of the things they talked about was that the parity. ETSU may be the top of the league from a standing standpoint, but on any given night in this league, as you've seen, anybody can win a basketball game. And so it's going to make for a very interesting tournament. At our level, those 3-4 days in March are what matters. The conference season's important. You look at teams that and I think there's more pressure at our level, quite frankly, when you get to those conference tournaments, because you could have an undefeated conference record and then you get to the conference tournament and lose a game, you don't make it to the big dance. So there's a lot of pressure going into those conference tournaments. And whether it's ETSU or Samford or anybody else going in that, you've got to be ready to play come those 3 or 4 days in March.
Okay, so last question, and I understand if Samford wins the SoCon tournament, you're not allowed to be in any of the conversations about your program. But the way Samford's season has gone, first year coach brought in an entirely new roster, some bumps in the road early on, but really have figured it out over the last month. Does that get taken into account, the challenges early, the transition leading to what has been a very, very strong February?
Again, you're going to get sick of me saying this, but it's that full body of work, man. They're looking at Samford no different than anybody else. And you're right, I can't be in the room. I won't be able to have any conversation on that at all. But again, it'll be the full body of work. I mean, that's kind of the new norm in college basketball right now, right? I mean, we were talking about Bucky McMillan earlier, that used to be our coach that now is at Texas A&M. I mean, he had to put together a whole new roster. That's just part of the world we live in with the transfer portal. So every team is a new team at the beginning of the year now. And so you've got to be able to make those adjustments. And at the end of the day, you got to be playing your best basketball down the stretch, right? You got to be playing your best basketball down the stretch.
Okay, so if you're talking to Bucky as a friend and as a former colleague, and he's going, how many more wins do we need to get in the dance? Can you give him a general idea, or it just comes down to what the full resume looks like on Selection Sunday?
Yeah, first of all, I would not do that. I think that would compromise the integrity of being on the committee. But secondly, I just think it's that full body of work, man. Here's the thing. You can play your way into the tournament. You can play your way out of the tournament. You want to get into the tournament, just win games.
That's it. Just win games. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you.